Double Reef's got turtles. Well, sleepy turtles. We snuck up on a loggerhead, precariously balanced on a sea plume, taking a nap. Not to be outdone, this green turtle stretched out on a nice, soft bell sponge. I wonder where this one landed. The name Double Reef is about as literal as you can get. That's because there are two reefs here, separated by a sand channel running parallel to the coast. But it's certainly not the only thing to enjoy here. In fact, you have to walk through a bit of Curaçao history just to get to the entrance. Double Reef sits just offshore from Park Lucha Pa Libertat, or Fight for Freedom Park, which has a number of monuments commemorating individuals and efforts to end slavery on the island. Unfortunately, there's not much narrative on the plaques, but there are links below if you'd like to learn more. Another reason we like this site is the cats. Some are a bit more timid than others. Of course, pet dogs out for a walk may account for some of the skittishness. There are a variety of birds, and a few crabs along the shore. If you're into people watching, you may see a local fisherman cleaning his catch, a passing tour group on scooters, or someone out for a walk. We only saw snorkelers here once, but that doesn't mean it isn't any good. There are probably other factors, like frequent surface waves and surge, a long walk, and less than ideal entry. That said, the sea life in the shallows is quite prolific, but we'll get to that a little later in the video. As far as uncommon creatures go, this convoluted barrel sponge was a first-time capture for us. And while this wasn't the first cornetfish we've seen, they are pretty rare. We also caught a juvenile blue parrotfish and a juvenile jackknife fish. We'll show longer clips later, but if you want to learn more about the uncommon animals shown here, check out the video description below for links to additional information about each one. Oh, before we forget, our small channel continues to grow, and we thank those of you that have already subscribed. For those of you that haven't yet, we have one word for you: porcupine fish. They don't really have anything to do with subscriptions per se, except they are cute, and if you like watching cute things, well, do what your heart tells you. Thanks! Smiley face. Double Reef is located just west of Curaçao's mega pier and is a great alternative to the Superior Producer when cruise ships are docked. Unlike Aruba or Bonaire, which generally have a main road traversing the island, Curaçao has quite a few roads that get you to different parts of the island. So directions for Curaçao dive sites will start from the closest main road, which should be easily found on any car rental company provided map. Pro tip: Maps.me is an excellent free offline GPS map. It doesn't recognize Double Reef, but if you enter Park Lucha Pa Libertat, it will guide you right there, even in airplane mode. Either way, here is what the very short drive and key intersections look like. From downtown, drive west on Potter Ewensweg. The second stoplight is Wagnar Well Galligan. There are no street signs, so look for the wall with the colored lines. Turn left at the light and continue to the dead end, which is John F. Kennedy Boulevard. Turn left again and find a place to park, as close to the gate as possible. There are a lot of parking spaces along the coast. Some are paved, and some are a mixture of gravel and dirt, but all sit in the sun. We have seen some people park across the street under the trees for a little bit of shade, but it's farther from the gate and your equipment may not appreciate the dirt. The only practical option for gearing up is at your car or truck, as there are no amenities here. Entering the water is done at a small protected lagoon. That's the good news. The bad news is that the lagoon is about 650 feet past the gate and through the park. It's a bit of a hike, especially with gear, but on the bright side, it's all paved and there are no stairs. We've seen the lagoon handled a couple of ways. If it's high tide, you can surface swim out to the shallows, and there should be enough clearance so you don't crash into a rock. At low tide, the bottom is very shallow, and walking out may be a better option. Note that the bottom rises just outside the lagoon before descending back into the shallows. Also note that it's very uneven and quite rocky underfoot, so be careful. Once you're deep enough, put on your fins because the reef and sea life start immediately. There was a mooring buoy in the shallows, but the rope is still there, and we have seen a dive boat tie up. It's in very shallow water, so please be careful when swimming back and during your safety stop. As always, pay attention overhead whenever near the surface. Looking out from shore, the reef lies at 195 degrees south-southwest, which means 15 degrees north-northeast gets you back to dry land. Divers typically head to the right. Not only is the reef very nice there, but the mega pier is to the left, and they don't allow diving around it when cruise ships are docked. When we dive Double Reef, we typically turn around at the street barricade, which is on the inside edge of the outer reef at about 50 feet. Another navigational element is the end of the rock barrier wall in front of the resort next door. On your way back, make a left turn there to return to the entrance. The initial reef starts right in the shallows. This is just 10 feet of water. It continues to slope gently down until you reach the sand channel between the reefs. On the other side of the sand, the second reef rises to a plateau before dropping down again beyond recreational dive limits. This is what the reefs look like from the shallows down to 100 feet. In general, the outer reef and sand channel in between the reefs rise the further west you go. Straight out from the entry, the channel bottoms at 75 feet, and the outer reef plateaus at 60. At the street barricade, the outer reef tops at 40 feet, and the channel bottoms at 60. Also, the channel width between the reefs varies, getting down to 15 feet in some places. The first thing you notice when descending in the shallows is all the brain coral. They're everywhere. It kind of looks like a giant pumpkin patch. But that is just a prelude to the abundance of sea life here. We saw lots of schools around both reefs. From blue tang in the shallows to smallmouth grunts on the inner reef. On the outer reef, there were schoolmasters, mahogany snappers, and some pockets of yellow goatfish. If that weren't enough, there were brown chromis everywhere. So many brown chromis. Fish weren't the only thing in large quantities. We mentioned all the brain coral in the shallows, but pillar coral seem to like it here as well. There are fields of pencil coral, and quite a few elkhorn coral. We should also mention all the West Indian sea eggs, too. While there is a lot to see in the shallows, the long gradual slope seems to give waves a little extra energy. The resulting ebb and flow of the surge can make buoyancy control and stability challenging for everything in the water. Certainly take a look around, but be careful around the rocks and coral. There were more than a few remarkable sightings at Double Reef. You might think all barrel sponges look like this, but they don't. This tight cluster of short, thick barrels with rough walls is called a convoluted barrel sponge and was a first-time capture for us. Can you guess what kind of parrotfish this is? The pale blue body and yellow crown indicate a juvenile blue parrotfish. Eventually, it'll grow up to look like this. Another pretty rare sighting was this juvenile jackknife fish sticking close to a rock in the sand between the inner and outer reefs. All of the flying gurnards we've ever seen have been in the sand. This was the first one we've seen hunting on a reef. We saw literally hundreds of creatures here, but don't have time to show them all. So here is a small sampling of the other sea life at Double Reef. The procedure for night diving is essentially the same, and you don't have to make that long walk or take your gear off in the dark, as JFK Boulevard is very well lit. On our first night dive, a very large school of Creole wrasse were darting all over the second reef, although they were hard to capture as they didn't like my lights. This tarpon, which had some sort of injury on its left side, did like my lights, and tagged along for most of our second dive, using the lights for hunting. Looking up from the reef, I caught a shrimp swimming in the water column, and followed it down to a coral head where it quickly sheltered. We're still trying to figure out what kind it is. We also saw this viper moray eel poking its head out of some lobed star coral. We haven't seen one of those in a very long time. There was a lot of sea life on the reef at night, from sea cucumbers to brittle stars, and so much more. If you're still not convinced to try out a night dive here, check out these other amazing creatures we saw at Double Reef after dark. Enjoy!